That's for my YouTube channel. Memorial Day was originally known as Decoration Day. I remember as a child coming up here with my parents. My dad was in the U.S. Navy. He retired some years ago as the chief physiologist in the Navy. And a year ago, April, he went on for his final promotion to heaven. And I miss him greatly. I know a lot of you would say that you have the best father. I think I did too. Decoration Day originated in the years following the Civil War, and they became an official federal holiday in 1971. The Civil War, which ended in the spring of 1865, claimed more lives than any conflict in U.S. history, and it required the establishment of the country's first national cemeteries. By the late 1860s, Americans in various towns and cities had begun holding springtime tributes to what seemed like an endless number of fallen soldiers. And they decorated their graves with flowers, and then they would have prayers. One of the earliest Memorial Day ceremonies was organized by a group of formerly enslaved people in Charleston, South Carolina, less than a month after the Confederacy surrendered in 1865. But it took over 100 years for the federal government to declare where they thought the official birthplace of Memorial Day was, and they said it was May 1866 in a place called Waterloo, New York. However, having gone to college in Virginia, Virginia said they had the first one in Warrenton, Virginia. And if you talk to anybody in the South, they're going to all tell you that they had the first one. I guess there's some ways you just can't get rid of having a war with somebody, isn't there? May 30th was the date of Decoration Day, as they called it. And it was chosen because it was not the anniversary of any particular battle. Southern states continued to honor their dead on separate days until after World War I. And I can tell you, when I was a little kid in Florida, there were still some communities that would not observe May 30th. They would have to have it on their day. During World War I, the United States found itself embroiled in yet another major conflict, and the holiday evolved to commemorate American military personnel who died in all wars, including World War II, the Vietnam War, the Korean War, and the wars in Iraq and Afghanistan. Now here's something that you don't usually hear on Memorial Day services. In the 1980s, we were losing thousands of active duty service members every single year, and not to war, but training for it. By 1999, we had lost almost 25,000 troops to accidents and suicide. And I can tell you, I remember being on some bases when I was on active duty, and some of the people committing suicide in the middle of shaving, looking in the mirror. Since the War on Terror began in 2001, America has lost more service members to training accidents and suicide than combat with the enemy. Can I repeat that? Since 2001, America has lost more service members to training accidents and suicide than combat with the enemy. The weight of service to your country is heavy, and it's a burden that they carry for all of us. The very least that we can do is take time to remember them. Now, something came to my mind when I was preparing for this, that it's supposed to represent all wars. And being a history major, I know how to do research, and so I started researching it. And the best that I could come up with was that we have had over 109 wars, military actions. They have other different words for it. And I thought, you know, how many people have ever bothered to try to remember some of these actions? So I'm going to try to do this as quickly as possible. Between 1775 and 1800, there were 3 wars or military actions. The American Revolution, the Northwest Indian War, and the Franco-American War. Between 1801 and 1819, there were 7 actions. The First Barbary War, Tecumseh's War, the War of 1812, which some people call the Second War of Independence because the British burned the White House during that. That's why it's white today. They had to paint it to cover out the burnings of that war. The Second Barbary War, the West Indies anti-piracy operations, the First Seminole War, and the African anti-slavery operations. Between 1820 and 1845, there were 11 more actions. The Callao Affair, the Arikara War, the Aegean anti-piracy operations, that's Greece. The Winnebago War, didn't know they had Winnebagos back then. The First Sumatran Expedition, the Black Hawk War, which Abraham Lincoln was involved with as a soldier. The Second Seminole War, the United States Exploring Expedition, the Second Sumatran Expedition, the capture of Monterey, the Battle of Coralarica, which is the Maoris out in the Pacific, and the Mexican War. And that takes us to 1846 to 1860. The Mexican War, the Cayuse War, the Apache Wars, the Puget Sound War, the Third Seminole War, or Billy Bowlegs War, the Yakima War, the Rogue Rivers War, the bombardment of San Juan del Norte, the Yakima War, the Battle of Tai-Ho Bay, First Fiji Expedition, the Second Opium War, that's in China, the Navajo Wars, and the Utah Wars, the Second Fiji Expedition, the Paraguay Expedition, the Paiute War, and the Reform War, which takes us up to the Civil War, 1861 to 1865. After the Civil War, there were the Indian Wars from 1861 to 1898. The bombardment of Queenon, the Dakota War of 1862, the Colorado War, the battles for Shimonoseki, Snake War, the Powder River Expedition, Red Cloud's War, Comanche Campaign, Formosa Expedition, Korean Expedition, the Modoc War, the Red River War, the Black Hills War, the Nez Perce War, the Bannock War, the Cheyenne War, the Sheep-Eater Indian War, the White River War, and the Pine Ridge Campaign, and the Second Samoan Civil War, 1898-99. Tonight on the History Channel, they're going to be talking about Theodore Roosevelt. He was in the Spanish-American War, 1898. From 1898 to 1924, the Moro Rebellion, the Philippine-American War, the Boxer Rebellion over in China, the occupation of Nicaragua, Mexican Revolution, occupation of Haiti, the occupation of the Dominican Republic. 7 wars there, which takes us to World War I. Did you know that we were involved in Russia between 1918 and 1920? Then World War II. In our period of time, from my lifetime, in the 1950s, there were 7 wars. Puerto Rico, Korea, First Indochina, the air battle over Mukden, Vietnam War, Laotian Civil War, the Second Indochina War, Lebanon Crisis. In the 1960s, there were 4. Congo Crisis, Bay of Pigs in Cuba, invasion of the Dominican Republic, the Korean Demilitarized Zone conflict. In the 1970s, there were 2, Cambodian Civil War and the Soviet War in Afghanistan, and yes, we were there dogging them again. In the 1980s, 8 wars. First Gulf of Sidra, Lebanese Civil War, invasion of Grenada, action in the Gulf of Sidra, bombing of Libya, Operation Earnest Will, Second Gulf of Sidra incident, invasion of Panama. In the 1990s, the Gulf War, the Iraqi no-fly zones conflict, Operation Restore Hope, Somalia, Bosnian War, Operation Uphold Democracy, the Kosovo War. In the 2000s, War in Afghanistan, Operation Enduring Freedom, Operation Enduring Freedom, Horn of Africa. One was in the Philippines. Second Liberian Civil War, the Iraq War, the war in northwest Pakistan, the war in Somalia. At present, the Operation Enduring Freedom in Trans-Sahara, the Al-Qaeda insurgency in Yemen, the Libyan Civil War, and the LRA insurgency. At best estimates of the cost of these wars was 1,396,733 deaths. And a lot of those were resulting after they were injured. A study from the National Institutes of Health estimates that half of the men who die every day today are veterans. When I was a kid, we used to hear them recite the poem In Flanders Fields. That's why the poppies are given out. But I would like to recite some other words that are a little more hopeful. Some of you may recognize them. No more night, no more pain, no more tears, never crying again, and praises to the great I Am. We will live in the light of the risen Lamb. See all around now the nations bow down to sing. The only sound is the praises to Christ our King. Slowly the names from the book are read. I know the King, so there's no need to dread. No more night, no more pain, no more tears, never crying again, and praises to the great I Am. We will live in the light of the risen Lamb. We're going to live in the light of the risen Lamb.